All right, welcome back to the Applied Leadership Podcast. My name is Brandon Young. As always, I am joined by my good friend and business partner, Blaine Smith, where we are two friends, one question, half an hour, zero script. And this one is a good one to just riff over with a buddy. Initiative. How do I ignite a sense of initiative in my leaders? How do I get my leaders, my team, my people to take initiative, to feel comfortable proposing new initiatives, to have a culture of initiative? That is essentially the question that we have been posed with. And I am really excited to talk about this one because initiative has been a theme throughout, I think, both of our lives. So when you think about initiative and a leader asking you, Blaine, what are some ways that you've really inspired initiative within your team? What do you think about?
I'll just admit I did not put a lot of forethought into this one. I did put on my Mogadishu Mile T-shirt, to sort of summon the spirit of sua sponte, which is the
Yes.
the Ranger motto.
Of their own
which is
accord.
all about initiative. That's right. So I just have a couple of scattered thoughts maybe to get started, and maybe you can pull one of them and get us organized. But, I think people cannot take initiative unless they have a couple of things. And one of those is I think they have to have a certain level of competence and or confidence in what they're doing. There might be some people out there that are happy just to kind of be blissfully ignorant and launch headlong into things that they don't know what they're doing. But for the most part, I think most people in a professional setting need to feel like they have a general understanding of what they're doing and their capability of doing it if they're going to take initiative on things. And so I think everything that we can do at every possible turn to help our people be good at what they do, to have confidence in themselves and in their skills, is really going to be important, because we can't just tell people like, hey, go be bold, take initiative, if they don't really have a level of confidence.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, to back that up. And the other one is, I think, you have to have an environment where that kind of thing is rewarded, and where, initiative that doesn't go quite as well isn't completely stamped out, or, people don't get slammed for that. And, there's a lot of talk right now about things like, psychological safety and that kind of thing. And I think that all plays into it. But I think it really just still comes down to practice. I mean, a lot of these things get a lot of lip service paid to them. But if you were a fly on the wall in a lot of organizations, you might see something a little different. So it just can't be a platitude. You can't just say, hey, we want people to take initiative. We want you to be innovative, take ownership of things. Like, that all sounds nice. And even if you mean it, it's not going to take root unless there are real concrete, tangible things going on that demonstrate that that is truly what you're looking for. And for me, my first two thoughts are, we have to make serious investments in our people in terms of their capabilities, their competence, and their confidence, so that they actually can look at new and novel situations and feel like they trust themselves to try something. And maybe more importantly, we have to reward that stuff when it goes well. And we have to highlight it and not crush people if it doesn't go as well, because you're going to have to take some of the bad with the good. I would argue that the good's ultimately going to outweigh the bad in the long term, but everything's not going to go perfect and swimmingly if people are out there taking initiative. And if you don't have your eyes wide open to that, people are going to get the message pretty quick.
Yeah, I like how you have taken initiative and put us both in the shoes of the individual and the macro environment by which the individual is operating within, because neither are in a vacuum from another. They're intrinsically connected in order for us to establish a culture of initiative. For example, you can't just walk in and say, like, I'm completely confident, and yet everything that you're doing is not hitting the mark very well in the environment around you. Well, you probably have a false sense of confidence, and that's probably not going to generate a good sense of initiative, or initiatives that are in keeping with where we're trying to go or what we're trying to achieve. And so the ability to keep those two held in tension, the fact that we want to invest in your competence, we want to help build your confidence, we want to have an environment by which you essentially have permission to execute, and then turn you loose towards those things that you have been empowered to actually conduct. And I think that's another critical aspect about a culture that welcomes initiative is clear expectations as to what folks are supposed to be doing. You think about being back when we were in the military and we were doing a lot of close combat battle or close quarter battle. You're out there clearing rooms and whatnot. And we used to always tell people, find a job, take the initiative to find the job. But it was a job that was in keeping with the objective to clear that building, eliminate enemy threat, and preserve friendly life, obviously, right? And reduce civilian casualties and things of that nature. People have to be super clear as to what it is we want them to do if they're going to find a job in keeping with where we are trying to go. And that's on us. And it's also as leaders. And it's also on us to make sure that you mentioned it here, I want to come back to it, we maintain some accountability, because empowerment is always inextricably linked to accountability. One cannot occur without the other. And when we think about accountability and the ability for it to be a initiative multiplier, we have to be willing to measure, evaluate, and reflect upon how we can either refine or recognize what's going well. So I like how you said, we want to reward that. We want to catch them doing good. We say all the time, catch them doing good. We also want to take some of that initiative and those initiatives and make sure that we are reflecting upon them, because sometimes it doesn't go as planned. And we need to be prepared to thoughtfully engage with folks when their initiative, maybe that was the wrong thing to do. You think about, again, going back to close quarter battle, like, you could have somebody who's super fired up and they found a job and they have just perceived that I'm going to take the initiative and go assault the next room, but the whole team isn't with them. That's a bad idea. Right idea, wrong execution. How we then take that analysis or that assessment and make sure that we hold intention. We do want you to have the initiative. I do want you to be getting after those next targets. We also have to do it in a way that helps us to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes initiative just doesn't work out. So I think that when we're talking to people, that's I think where the real soup is, where it gets real kind of murky, right? Because you want to inspire that spirit of initiative. We also want to make sure that it is in keeping with what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you're saying makes me think of what's probably the biggest misunderstanding about initiative, which is that a lot of times we tend to think that there is an inverse relationship between the level of guidance or the detail of guidance given out and the amount of initiative taken. And I would argue that there is actually a directly proportionate relationship to the quality of the guidance and the amount of initiative taken. And so by that, I mean, if you think that we can, like, quote unquote, hire good people and get out of the way, I think that is not right. That is not a recipe for success. That almost never works. It sounds good. It actually doesn't work very well. I think that people are much more likely to take initiative, to be creative and innovative if they actually have very clear and detailed guidance about what it is they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to achieve, what their parameters are, what are the values, the norms, the limits of what they're allowed to do. It doesn't mean we have to be super prescriptive on how people get things done, but we do have to be very descriptive about what it is we need them to do, what the rules are, what their resources are, and those kinds of things. And then people will take initiative to do things because they'll have a level of confidence that they're operating in bounds. They'll know that what they're doing is in keeping with what it is they're supposed to be trying to achieve. That has to be the case. And so maybe that's the biggest point I would make on this right now, unless I can come up with a better one later, is let's not let's not feel like we can give people less guidance and assume they'll take more initiative. That is just not how that works. If we want more initiative, we actually probably need to either give more or at least better guidance so that people feel like, okay, I totally understand what I'm supposed to be doing and where my left and right limits are, and I can take initiative within that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's the kind of stuff that gives us the courage. Yeah, I very rarely throw that word out there when we're having these conversations, because I think it can almost suggest that, if you're not like storming a machine gun nest, you don't understand courage, which I completely disagree with. I think that we see little acts of courage all day, every day, and I think that it could be quite courageous to take initiative on something that maybe has not been done before, or maybe it hasn't been done in that specific way before. And I think that's a really important thing for us to talk about is, sometimes we have these things. We've got the competence and the confidence. We've got the environment in which it's okay to try new things. And, we're not going to, cut you off below the knees if got something wrong. I think even in circumstances where we have clear guidance, where either we have received clear guidance or we have delivered clear guidance, there's still some barriers that we see. People maybe have some barriers inside. And I think one of them, we talk about this a lot in different contexts of our leadership, but we are all shaped by the experiences that we have had. And our experiences then inform our expectations. And I think it's fair to note that if we are in a leadership position and we are consistently trying to do these things like invest in the competence, create a sound environment for initiative to blossom, provide the kind of guidance, resources, and support by which we still may have folks that are a little bit resistant or maybe having a hard time kind of moving the needle in that way. And I think that we can look for small ways to encourage their initiative. Maybe it comes down to one of those difficult conversations where we can ask them, hey, I feel like we've kind of given you some clear parameters to operate within. I feel like we've, invested in you in the best way that we can. I'd like to see a little more initiative out of you. I think in moments like this, we can maybe give them some examples, maybe give them some ideas. For example, I'd love to hear what you think about this project. We're moving in that direction, but maybe there's something we're missing. Why don't you come back to me next week and let's have a conversation about some ways that you think this might be improved. Or even the permission to ask questions. I think that's one of the things that maybe can help us get moving is, I'm inviting you to approach this with a posture of curiosity. I believe in the competence that you have, and I'm giving you the permission to be a little curious about this. Ask some questions. What are some questions? What are some what if questions that you might ask as it relates to any given part of your role and responsibility? I guess what I'm saying is, as I'm kind of processing this out loud, Blaine, is that sometimes initiative just doesn't come quite as naturally to people based on their disposition, based on their experiences in life. I was raised by a single mother and I'm a Gen Xer, so I have flush with opportunities to flex initiative, and in some ways more initiative than maybe was ever necessary. Not everybody has operated in that kind of space. And I think, we can be a little bit empathetic to that while still trying to encourage some of that activation of initiative.
I totally agree. And I think the word courage is well placed here because when I think about initiative, the other word that pops up as its close partner is responsibility. And I think one of the barriers to initiative for a lot of people is that we know, even if only subconsciously, we know that if we take initiative on something, we're kind of putting our name on it. We're going to have to take some responsibility for how it went, whether it was good or bad. And a lot of people do not feel comfortable for lots of reasons, voluntarily taking responsibility for things that nobody made them be responsible for. Some people are comfortable being responsible for things they've been very clearly assigned, but not as many people are comfortable saying, no one made me do this or put my name on it, but I'm going to take the initiative because I see an opportunity to have some success, and I'm going to take responsibility for how this goes. That's just not a natural disposition for a lot of people. And I think one of the ways that leaders can help to make that more of a normal thing within their organization is one, which you've already talked about, which is catch people doing it right, highlight them, show it to other people so that others will see that, okay, this is what's being rewarded and recognized, and I can do this too. But I think the other way is to just have really clearly defined roles and responsibilities for people so that they can take the initiative where they need to in order to fulfill their responsibilities. I think the environments I've noticed where people take the least amount of initiative is where there's convoluted lines of responsibility. Maybe there's a big team where, if the project doesn't go that well or doesn't get launched on time, it won't really be clear exactly who is at fault for that. And so you don't see much initiative because there's not a lot of upside if you take initiative and it goes well, because the credit's going to be distributed. And there's frankly not enough blame sometimes or responsibility if it doesn't go well, because everyone can kind of be like, well, we had 15 people on the project and I'm not quite sure why it didn't meet spec. But as a leader, you can maybe do a better job of assigning clear roles, responsibilities for things so that people know, hey, I've got to do this portion of the thing. This is my job. And if I don't do it, no one else will. And so I'm probably going to be much more motivated, driven, and creative about how I get my stuff done because I know that it's on me. And you and I were very lucky, I think, to grow up as salespeople when we first got out of the Army, where nobody was going to make my number except for me. Literally nobody could help me achieve my goals and make my bonus checks and move my way up the leaderboard except for me. I mean, there were people that could help me and could give me advice, but nobody was making those sales calls or closing those deals except for me. And so that environment allowed me to take lots of initiative. And so I didn't dress like a lot of the other sales reps I was competing against dressed, because I didn't feel comfortable wearing a suit and tie. I didn't ask permission. I took the initiative to modify my wardrobe a little bit so that I could feel comfortable going out and doing my job. I stayed away from large accounts for a lot of my first year and a half on the job because I didn't feel like I could compete there. And the conventional wisdom might have been, hey, go in there and get some of that business. And I went to the rural communities and to the smaller offices where I thought I could get a toe in the door and could compete. I took a lot of initiative to sell, dental and oromaxillofacial biopsies and fine needle aspirations of the thyroid and stuff that no one else was really thinking much about, because I was having to find creative ways for me to make my number within my skill set, within my environment. No one told me to do that. But the reason I did it wasn't because I was so creative or just had so much initiative in general. It's because it was a matter of survival. I wasn't going to make my number unless I figured out some ways to do that. And so the initiative was sort of a natural extension of the responsibility that had been placed upon me in a very clear way. And every job and every role can't be that way. But I do think, again, going back to what I said earlier, clear guidance, clear roles and responsibilities, I think will engender a lot more initiative because people will do what they need to do in order to be successful and get what's been very clearly assigned to them done.
Yeah, I like how that really balances the difference between the what and the how. When you have clear guidance, you know exactly what we are trying to do. You are trying to hit your number. How you hit your number, that was all over the place, right? You've mentioned these other product lines that you kind of went after. It's worth noting that we only had 3 product lines. It was urology, gastrointestinal pathology, and then hematology oncology. That's what we were asked to really focus on. And your ability to change how you got there, to the what you were trying to do, I think is I think it's great. I think you also have a high degree of self-assurance, and you also came into it with a lot of confidence because you had had the opportunity to, be out there in the world doing, great things on the front line of American policy. And I respect that a lot. Many people have not and will not get the chance to lead an ODA team overseas, or, lead a ranger squad or a ranger platoon, and all that kind of stuff, where you're a young person and are required to develop initiative. I don't think it has to be that way, though. I don't think it has to be so dramatic for people to develop some initiative. I think part of the courage is to accept progress and kind of, progress over perfection, certainly, and kind of get past the need for perfection, or the need to know, the need to have a playbook. I think that's one of the things that we don't talk about too much, but I'm immediately thinking about that when it comes to initiative, and going back to the idea of courage. Is it's awfully courageous to get out there when there is no playbook for it. It's awfully courageous to even to be within a large organization that might be flush with all of these different SOPs and practices and procedures and tactics and standards and guidance and all of these parameters. I think it is pretty courageous to be the kind of person who looks at what it is that you're doing day to day and says, what if we did this a little bit differently? Kind of sua sponte, of your own accord. That could be pretty courageous too, and actually propose something and give it a try. And when we do propose things, we were actually talking to one of our partners about this just yesterday. We had this simple and flexible structure in the Army. Whenever you were going to initiate an idea or propose something that you did not necessarily have direct control or authority over influencing, but that you had identified a better way to do it, and it was issue, discussion, recommendation. Here's the issue that I'm identifying. The end of the what if. What if we could save time and reduce cost by enabling somebody to make a call on their own, or to change something on their own that they maybe have the knowledge to do? Well, let's discuss the parameters around that. Here's what could go well. Here's what could maybe not go so well. Here are the components that are, here are the regulations that maybe, influence this, or here are the standards that maybe influence this. Here's why I think we might be able to get past it. Here's why the person that I'm working with thinks we might be able to get past it or do it well. And then finally, here's my recommendation. I think we could do it one of maybe a couple of ways. And this is one of the things in the, military decision-making process that I think we were really well conditioned and suited to do. Is MDMP tells you to develop courses of action. Here's course of action 1, 2, and 3. Here's 4. It doesn't have to be, one of 2 different ways. We could achieve it maybe this way, or this way. What do you think about that? And be able to propose it so that there is a thoughtful decision made based on all the initiative that we have taken to identify and improve a process step, an issue, a problem, an approach, whatever.
Yeah, I think courses of action is actually really interesting to me. I love the idea of coming with a recommendation. I think, we've heard plenty of times throughout our lives, like, don't bring up a problem unless you have a solution. And I think that's bad. I don't think that's a good policy, because then people are not going to bring you their problems. It is. I like the idea, though, of saying, hey, if you see an issue, bring the issue to me. Bring me some data around the issue, or some thoughts around the issue, some discussion. And then I'd love if you have a recommendation or a couple of possible recommendations, and we can discuss it. And I'm not going to tell you, never bring me a problem you don't have a solution to. I just think that's a terrible posture for a leader. But you could massage it just a little bit into the framework you just offered, and I think it can become a totally different thing. Because I think ultimately, when it comes to initiative, human beings are going to be assessing what's in it for them. And if someone takes initiative on something and it doesn't go that well, they've made themselves responsible for this thing. And if they get crushed or totally blown up because it didn't go well, that's a serious negative consequence that everyone's going to want to avoid, right? This is some of the great work done in behavioral economics. We have real loss aversion. Something has to be relatively twice as good to gain as it is to potentially lose for us to try it out, because losing $1 hurts twice as bad as winning $1 for most people, right? And so you're already up against it as a leader, because it's already a 2-to-1 ratio of people are assessing what they stand to lose versus what they stand to gain. And so it's really incumbent upon us as leaders to make sure that there's something to gain by taking initiative that's at least twice as good, right? And so if a field service technician has a great idea and they take the initiative and they bring you a great solution or a great recommendation, there's got to be something in it for them. Because why would they do it otherwise? Otherwise you're just going to get the kind of standard, I just work here disposition from everybody. And that's not going to get you very far. And so the sky's the limit. Really, your creativity is the only thing that's going to limit you on what it is you can provide for your people in terms of reward. But we better be thinking pretty seriously about, what do people stand to gain if they take initiative? Because if we're just saying we want you to do it, because why? Because it'll feel fun, it'll be cool, the business will grow the bottom line.
Great.
Let's be more specific. No kidding. What is in it for any person on your team or in your organization if they effectively take initiative, if they display that level of courage, if they come up with solutions and recommendations on their own? What is in it for them? And if you cannot articulate that very clearly to yourself and to them, you probably have no shot at instilling a culture of initiative. And so, maybe it's spot bonuses or rewards. Maybe it's public recognition. Maybe it depends on the person. I'm not sure what it is, but if we can't identify pretty clearly what the upside is for someone taking initiative, they just won't, because people need to keep their jobs. They don't want to be hassled. They don't want to be put on blast. And so they're probably just going to follow the protocol, and they're going to be that customer service rep or that field service rep or that salesperson that says, hey, I'd love to do this for you, but according to my protocols, I'm not allowed to. And that's not going to make for happy customers, and it's not going to help you grow your business.
Yeah, I think this is a good place for us to kind of circle the wagons on this, because I think the last thought that I'll add to that is also, don't be so quick to think that there also are not intrinsic rewards that the individual might see that we might not see. For example, if I could do this remotely, then it would save me an hour and a half of sitting in traffic, and that is making me want to bang my head against the steering wheel. That could be an intrinsic motivation that, this individual might have. And so I think asking, how did you come up with this? Or what were the things that you thought about that led you to this? Or what were the issues that maybe pre-existed that I didn't know? Thinking in terms, or asking in terms of the what's or the how's, I find is often much better than, why did you do this? When we say why can start to feel a little bit like an attack, and it automatically will make people recede back into their shell and just say, whatever, I'll just work here. I won't demonstrate that initiative. And so to kind of put a bow on this session here, I think this has been a fun jam, and it's a timely topic, and one that really is got me thinking more and more. I think the couple things that we noted here is that when we think about creating a culture of initiative, we want to start with understanding that the individual needs to have both the competence and the confidence, and that we can play a part in establishing that, particularly by creating an environment where initiative is welcomed. In addition to that, where it's also rewarded, getting an understanding of what is in it for the individual to actually flex some of that initiative. And I think part of that environment we discussed is to establish clear guidance as to what needs to be done and permission to flex some of that initiative. We talked a lot about responsibility, and we also talked about all of these things coming together to enable the courage to begin to initiate or have the initiative. And so with that, I'm going to initiate the end of this conversation for now, but we appreciate the questions. Keep them coming to contact@appliedleadershippartners.com. We love hearing from you guys. We'd love to hear if there are other things that you want to hear us talk about while we're on this podcast, because I don't know if you can tell this by now, but we love to talk. It is really fun. So we'll see you guys next time. And thanks a ton for being part of our community here on the Applied Leadership Podcast. Take care.